Okay, welcome to our first weekly assignment. And again, I'm sorry that we're doing this not in person, but we'll do the best we can. And at the very top of the document, well, let me back up. The assignment can be found. Let me pull this over here. The assignment can be found in several places. You can go to content, and then you can go to module one, and you can go to in-class activity. And I've written some notes here, and then I've got these two files. So you're going to download these two files, and from here on, this is what we're going to be working with. And this is a very similar setup to the rest of the course. You have Word document that kind of outlines the tasks, and then you have an Excel file that's where you're going to do your work and what you're going to submit eventually. Okay, so I'll put this away. And so I'm in the Word document, and this is an async version I just made, so these are relevant notes. Put this in all caps because if I put something in the announcement in week 0 to say, hey, test out Excel, but for whatever reason you didn't do that, and now you're realizing you got Excel problems, text me. It says contact me, but if you've watched any of my videos, you know that you should be texting me rather than emailing me for a quick response. They're both fine ways to communicate, but texting is going to get a faster response. Okay, let me just make sure I've got Google Voice set up here because I did get a new phone and it's been a while. So get that, make sure I've got all that set up. All right. So general working on this document. Yep. Okay. 3 distinct aspects. Yep. Warm up. Okay. Data collection. So in this part, you see a Google Doc link, and typically if you're on in Word, you have to do the control click to go to the link. So this is just a common Google Doc for everybody in 102 this winter. And I've got 3 questions here. What neighborhood do you live in? How many days have you been alive? What's your zodiac sign? And you're going to answer those 3 questions. And so there's 2 places actually you're going to put the answers to that. You're going to put them in this doc, and you're going to put them into the Excel file. So if you open the Excel file, you'll see that the warm-up sheet says those same 3 questions with an additional column here for you to fill out, and then a little bit of a space for reflection. So I'm going to put in my answers here. I'll be the first person. You'll see this when you click on this link. How many days have I been alive? Right. So that's kind of a hard question because I know how many years old I am, but I don't know how many days I've been alive. I'm going to do a rough calculation. I did give you a little tool here, the calculator site. Let me just make sure that link is still working. Yep, still working. Okay. So I'm not going to give you my birth date, but because I know you could hack into my identity. I'll just pause. Okay, I'm guessing 16,760 based on a little rough calculation, did a little math there. Zodiac sign, I know I'm an Aquarius. Okay, so I put in my data there. I'm going to put in my data here also. Bridgeport, I think it was 16,760, and then Aquarius. All right. And then we'll get into categorizing these. So quantitative and qualitative is a big split in the data collection world. Like when you're going out to get information, either it's numeric, quantitative, or it's words or categories, which are qualitative, also called categorical. And so an easy way to start the differentiation process is to see if there's numbers involved, because if there's numbers involved, it's probably quantitative. I say probably because there are certain types of things like phone numbers where it appears as numbers, but it actually is categorical. Um, and one of the ways you can sort of explain that is that if it's numeric, then doing operations makes sense. So multiplying by two, adding numbers together. And if you think about adding, say, phone numbers or zip codes, really doesn't make any sense because those numbers don't sort of represent something about like the size of the thing. It's really just a label, right? A zip code is just a label for a place. It's easier to have a strategy of having a numbering system, kind of like a license plate. If a license plate was all happen to be numbers, that doesn't make it quantitative because it could also just be characters. So that's their labels for the thing. Okay. So that should take you through the warm-up sheet, labeling your information as quantitative or qualitative, and then a small reflection here. Now you'll see this is a common thread throughout this assignment, that there's a reflection in a lot of sheets. What I'm looking for here is just some writing to show that you're thinking about what I said. And if my advice is, if you ever run into a reflection that you don't know what to say, I think you'll know what to say here. Either the problems were difficult or they weren't. If they were difficult, I would like to hear more about that. Doesn't specifically say that, but that's sort of implicit. I always encourage students to be more expansive rather than more terse or concise. Like, I want you to explain your thinking and talk about what's happening. Okay. So I think we're done with the first part of the warm-up. And so we're going to move on to the refresher on frequency tables. So I'm going to do this part 2, and then we're going to stop the video, and I'll make another video as we get into the measures of center. I want to keep these relatively short. So the refresher on frequency tables is that the frequency table is a way of organizing data, right? So it's like a first step. We've collected the data, now we're going to organize it. And so what I did is I took a previous class's information. We have these different zodiac signs, and I'm going to figure out how many of each one there are. So an easy way to do this is just, this is a very small list, so I can do it with my eyes. If you want to be fancy, you can do a sorting over here, sort and filter, sort A to Z, and then I can see all of the things grouped together. So I can see that there's 3 Aquarius people, and there's 1 Capricorn person. Notice that at the bottom, this number is changing. That's because I set up a sum formula for you. For those of you who've had experience with Excel, especially if you took MTH 101, you'll be familiar with this. But I set up the sum, and it will keep updating as you go through here. At the end, your sum should end up as 11 because there's 11 students here. And so when I put all of these numbers together, they should end up to 11. Okay, and then I'll just show you the basic approach for this and remind you about autofill. Relative frequency is just the number, the frequency, divided by the total, because what we're saying is I want the frequency, but relative to the total. And this gives us essentially a percentage. So right now, if there was only 4 people, I would have 3 out of 4, which is 75%. Now, in terms of how you type this, the only thing I don't want to see is 75%, because that shows me nothing in terms of your process. I click on this cell, I see 75%. I'm like, where did it come from? Well, the video, and it's wrong because we don't have everybody in here yet. What I'm looking for, this is a slight improvement, 3 divided by 4. This is using Excel as a calculator, but not using any cell references. And that still gives me 75%. So at least I can see your thinking. This is better. D4 divided by the 11 shows me that I'm referencing the frequency here and I'm dividing by the total. And the other reason that this is better is that as I add more information, this number will change, so it will be correct. Now, we will get into autofill later and we'll need it. So one of the things that I'll try to do right now is autofill. And I get a lot of errors here, which is because I made a mistake in my formula, which is this worked fine, but if I autofill, it will adjust both of the cells down. And now I'm dividing by D12, which is not good because D12 doesn't have the total anymore. So I really want this to stay at D11. The way to do that is to put the $ in between the D and the 11, and that fixes the cell rep. So from there, then I should be able to autofill. And now this is working. Notice that the total here adds up to 1. That is an important checkpoint on the relative frequency. And it's actually a key to one of the Newton problems that you're going to see this week, is that we know the relative frequency should add to 1, and therefore we can work backwards if we're missing a value to figure out what's missing. I'll make a video on that later. Okay, so I think that's it for the refresher on the frequency table. I just want to make sure you remember what a frequency table is, you remember what relative frequency is. There may even be something about cumulative relative frequency. That's a little silly, but we'll just mention what cumulative means. Cumulative is the sum up to that point of the table. And it's really kind of sketchy whether it means anything here, because these are qualitative categorical things. So there's not really any order except for alphabetical. But anyways, if I wanted to do the cumulative relative frequency, I would be doing the sum of everything up to that point. And so I can start with E4 to E4. And if I fix this cell reference, then I'll be able to do the relative frequency, which quickly goes to 100% because I haven't finished this. But it should end at 100% because that's the same as the total relative frequency. So again, I did a sum formula. I used a fixed cell reference with the starting one. And then I have the second one is how far I'm going in the frequency table. And I'm doing relative frequency. So I'm doing E. You could also do cumulative frequency and just do the column D sum. But I think cumulative frequency does show up in Newton. So I'll point that out. This is not part of what you need to make for what you're turning in. Okay. All right. I'm going to stop the video there, and then we'll move on to measures of center.